Quarantine. So what exactly does that word mean, and are there different types of quarantine? Well, I'm going to talk all about that in this video. Check it out.
Let's go.
Hi, welcome. Coach Tanya here with Criticalbench, holistic health practitioner. And there's a lot going on in the world right now. We're towards the end of March, heading into April, and right now, as things stand, there are several places in the world that are on a mandatory enforced lockdown, which means other than the essentials for human life, like getting groceries or seeing a doctor, people are having to stay home, okay? And something, when we hear something like that, when we see something like that, it can create a lot of fear. But let's talk about that and try to shift the perspective into something that's more positive and hopeful. Before I talk a little bit more about that, I want you to check that pinned comment below. If you are all of a sudden now becoming very, very concerned, or thinking that, you've put your own health and wellness maybe kind of lower down on the list, we've got a program here for you that is going to, basically it's a 3-day, it's like a kickstart program. It is an immune boosting protocol, and really what it is it's going to get you back into the habit of making your health and wellness a number one choice, get you establish and setting some new patterns of behavior to do things that are good for you, that are going to feed your cells, feed your body, get you back on track with better nutrition and a lot of other lifestyle choices and behaviors that can increase your overall wellness, and that means a stronger, healthy immune system. So click that pinned comment below and check that out. And let's talk about quarantine. So quarantine, what do you envision when you hear the word quarantine? Like, do you just sort of envision yourself in like a sort of a big, inside these big four walls, very sterile environment, bright lights and not much else? It's a sterile sounding word, definitely. So what my hope is with the video is that we can, sort of what I would like to do is convey more of a sense of logical perspective on what quarantine is, what it means, why it's helpful, and decrease some of the paranoia and fear and hysteria, because it can certainly lend itself to that way of thinking. And, first of all, quarantine is not necessarily just for sick people. Sometimes people choose to self-quarantine as a means to do their part to not spread a virus or to spread illness, because they're just not sure. Because it's very possible that we can carry viruses in our own bodies and not become symptomatic and not ever feel sick. It doesn't mean that we don't have it and that we cannot spread it to somebody else. So sometimes people will choose, depending first of all, depending on their beliefs and values, but also perhaps the kind of industry they work in, how many people they're interacting with in a day. They may choose, especially in a situation like the one we're in now with COVID-19 and a lot of, public, official, government mandated suggestions in terms of social distancing. People may choose that on their own to do their part. And it's not a bad idea. It's really not a bad idea, because again, you can be asymptomatic, and it's not, it's not always about you getting ill. It's about, can I possibly make somebody else become ill? And that's certainly something a lot of us don't want to do if we can help it at all. So when it comes to quarantine, there's different types or different words for it, but like a self-quarantine is just what I said. An individual choosing to sort of pull back from public stuff, to pull back from society and just kind of stick close to home, other than doing the things they have to, like getting the groceries, possibly making a doctor's visit, things that they need to do to sustain human life. But again, in a situation like the one that we're faced with now, which is really, to be honest, I never thought I'd see something like this in my lifetime. But here's where we're at. And there are people choosing to self-quarantine to just lower the risk of infection to others, okay? Now, a quarantine can be enforced. So, for example, a few weeks ago, if you were traveling, now I can't speak on all countries, but I live in the US now, but I am from Canada, and I had friends that were, right before this really broke out of China, there was a bit of talk that had made its way to this hemisphere, but it really hadn't really become this entity that it is now. But there was some talk, some whisperings about a possible, some sort of like flu, like a SARS type of flu or something that was not good. But I had friends in Canada, a couple of friends actually, when I think about it, that had already planned holidays and had already left Canada to travel to places like Mexico and Cuba and some other fabulous holiday destinations. Now, while they were away, it very quickly became a very, very big thing. And upon coming back to Canada, had to go into 14-day quarantine. Now, they weren't isolated and put into some government facility or some hospital, but they were given very strict instructions on terms of, going home, now getting any essentials they needed from a grocery store, anything that they needed supplies-wise, but 14 days mandatory at-home self-quarantine. No public outings, like social outings, just nothing like that. So that is something that's more enforced, an enforced quarantine, and you do want to abide by that. Now, isolation is something that it's a type of quarantine, and it's what public officials will do for the people that are already sick. So, for example, painting a very hypothetical picture here, if all of a sudden there's an outbreak, let's say in a hospital or a senior's home, or even, I don't know, let's thinking of the movie Outbreak, like a community or something. Public health officials can come in if there's an outbreak and it's just rampant, and they can completely isolate that wing, that area. So nobody's allowed in, nobody's allowed out, as a means to contain and treat the already sick and to keep that virus from leaving that area and infecting other people, other areas, okay? And that's like a form of isolation. Now, social distancing can be questioned. Is that a type of quarantine or not? I guess it depends on your perspective, and we're all going to have a different perspective. And for those of you who are introverts, you've probably been like preparing for this. You're probably better prepared than a lot of us, and you've been, you're kind of like, this isn't such a big deal. And in 2020, it's really not. I mean, with the internet and all of the platforms we have in terms of means of communication, this is not like social distancing being enforced in the 30s or the 40s or the 50s. It's really not. And it's something that we have a moral obligation to respect and to practice. So social distancing, again, I suppose it could be argued, depending on your perspective, as a type of quarantine, or you may feel quarantine if you're a very social person, but you're not necessarily having to stay indoors completely without ever going outside. The goal, as far as my understanding with social distancing, is to limit large groups of people getting together, because viruses, infection, love large groups of people. You get people laughing, you get people talking and hugging and dancing and doing all kinds of things, and that is a virus's dream. It's so easy to spread like that, okay? So with social distancing, if rules are enforced, if principles or parameters are put in place to say, okay, groups less than 10, the shutting down, the closing of bars, restaurants, social establishments that cater to social gatherings, and whether that's limiting the amount of people in or closing them down entirely and going to just basically pick up and delivery, whatever. I understand there's a huge economic impact there. But these are not decisions made for the purpose of wreaking havoc on the economy, destroying businesses, destroying people's lives. That's not the motivation here. The motivation is to save tens, possibly hundreds of thousands of people from becoming terribly ill unnecessarily. Because what we do know is that by enforcing and respecting and practicing social distancing, we have a tremendous impact on reducing the amount of infection, the speed at which it spreads, how far it spreads, how many people it can reach. And it's something that we can do easily at no cost to us. It's as bad as we tell ourselves. If we're sitting at home thinking, oh, I can't go out tonight, I can't go get a pizza, I can't go have a beer with my friends at the bar, my kids can't go to school. I mean, there's a whole lot of things to feel really down about and create a very bleak, grim outlook. But what would the outlook, what's the possible outlook if we didn't have the social distancing aspect in place? What would that outlook be, possibly? Possibly a lot worse, and possibly hitting very close to home in that it could possibly infect and affect in a very, very massive way someone that you love very dearly. We do know, as far as we know, the information's changing quite quickly. When COVID first kind of broke, social media, news, broadcasting, what we were told and what was known is that definitely that 60 plus older people were definitely at a higher risk. People with autoimmune disorders or diseases, immune compromised. And what was the other high risk group? I can't think. I have been reading the CDC and WHO websites daily since this broke to stay as current as possible. So my head is full of numbers and data, and some of it is no longer relevant because it's outdated. But definitely more senior populations and people that are immune compromised were definitely in the high risk groups. And initially they were saying 60 years plus. Well, that has since dropped to 50, still including the immune compromised. We do know, or what I've read, is that children can definitely contract the virus. Largely, they seem to be asymptomatic and not really get ill. I don't think there's any cases as of yet of young children with COVID, but the CDC had a section where children may get it, be asymptomatic, and carriers of it, okay? Again, with viruses, especially a virus we don't know much about and are trying to learn, there are organizations and agencies doing their very best to keep us updated. And when there is a lot of uncertainty, there is no vaccine or cure or sort of any kind of medical intervention that can completely halt it. We have to come together as communities of people to do our part to stop it as quickly and as best we can. So social distancing, quarantines, whether they are enforced or not, isolations are means to do that. They're not means to punish us. It may feel like it, but really these are excellent measures to take to help stop this thing, So I'm going to challenge you to change your mindset and look at it as something really, really good, and feel good about if you're actually honoring and respecting the social distancing, the quarantine, whatever your situation is, wherever you are now. If you're honoring and respecting that, I want you to feel absolutely amazing for doing your part, because it's a big deal. And all of us doing what seems like a little bit adds up to big, big steps to stop this thing from spreading and getting worse and out of control. Okay, well, thank you for watching. I hope you liked the video, and I hope it did help ease maybe some anxiety you might have right now with COVID and what's happening. And again, I'm speaking from where things are at today. I'm in Tampa Bay, USA. It's the information I have now. This is where things are at. I'm not under a lockdown or a quarantine situation. Social distancing is very much a big part of life right now, and we're all doing our part to honor that and respect that and live that way until this thing settles down. Again, check that pinned comment below for a program to help get you on track with better health and some better lifestyle choices to keep you strong, healthy, fit. It's a great little kickstart, and hopefully you take that seriously, and moving forward you continue to employ and adopt a lot more of these principles to continue to function optimally, to have a very strong, healthy body and mind, and therefore ultimately an immune system that's functioning really, really well. Coach Tanya with Criticalbench. If you haven't done so already, before I go, make sure you click that subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss any more of our fantastic content. I look forward to talking to you soon. Be well and take care.